Retro.
Hi, this is Fred Tatasciore, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. The Force is strong with both of them.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we're going to be getting into the next installment of our Revenge of the Sith series here in just a moment. But before we do that, Jay, please remind everybody where we can be found online.
Absolutely, Dennis. We are very conveniently found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right. That is the line. The signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. And we are kind of back on a regular recording schedule, so we were able to line up a guest, and we'll introduce him here in just a moment. But for those of you that are still kind of new to the podcast and you're wondering what we are doing with the episode titled Revenge of the Sith Part 11, every year we pick one of the movies that's celebrating an anniversary, typically that ends with a 5 or a 0, and we break it down into 10 to 15 minute segments, and then we spend about an hour talking about that segment. And it just gives us a way to dive into the details of the movie in a way that we otherwise wouldn't get to do. It really is a chance to focus on things that we would normally miss if we were just talking about the movie in one full swoop. So with that having been said, we are going to go ahead and dive into this segment. And now we are joined by Anthony King, your host from Force Ghost Conversations. How are you doing this evening, Anthony?
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invite to chat about my favorite movie of all time, and arguably the most important part of this movie, which is, for 8 minutes roughly that we're here to chat about it. I mean, it's a pretty awesome action-packed 8 minutes.
Well, good. Sounds like we asked you for just the right segment, and thanks for being back again on Podcast Stardust. Always great to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
My pleasure.
Yeah, as an aside, this was a movie that was really, really hard to chop up compared to the other ones when I do these annual series, because typically you can find something right between 10 to 12 minutes that cuts off nicely. And that hasn't been the case, especially because the third act of this movie is just lots of action, lots of action, lots of action, and it doesn't divide up so neatly. So anyways, shortchanged you a couple minutes on one of these, but we'll have you back next year when we're discussing our next movie and give you a couple extra then. But before we get into the discussion of this segment, we have to ask the questions that we normally pose to our guests. And as usual, I let Jay lead that off. So Jay, go ahead.
All right. So Anthony, our first question is, what was your first experience seeing Revenge of the Sith? So what do you remember about the experience itself? Any specific memories or anything going on at the time that you remember in your own life that you can relate it to?
Yeah, absolutely. This is wonderful because, I was 10 at the time this movie came out. So I believe I was last on to chat Phantom Menace. So like my memories were very vague about that experience a little bit. But for this one, you could arguably say this is my Star Wars film, right? This is the one time, at least when I was a kid, right? I know Force Awakens and all that, those are still my Star Wars too. But this was the time when I was a kid where I knew that there was like a build up to it. I was anticipating seeing this movie. I was looking forward to the trailers coming out. I remember when the poster, right, that came up, it was just like Anakin hidden in like a shadow with like Vader overtaking him, came up in our movie theater, movie E-Town, and in the early days of 2005, and I was like, yeah, all right, we're getting in this, it's coming. So it was really a special time. I remember the build up for sure. My uncle was actually getting married that weekend in Pittsburgh, ironically, as we talked off air here. And we were going the next day to the wedding, and I was like, I have to be here opening. I had a big meltdown with my mom. I was like, you don't understand. I cannot not see this movie on opening night, 7 p.m. that first showing here. And she was like, no, you can see it afterwards. And I was like, no, Mom, you don't understand. If I'm at the lunch table with all my buddies and I'm not like telling them what I thought about the movie, I'll feel first off left out. Second off, they might spoil it for me, even though we can get into I knew a lot more about this movie leading up to it for a variety of reasons. Um, and so yeah, I was very much like, we got to go see this, and she reluctantly gave in, knowing that she'd have drive 4 hours the next morning. So she was a big trooper on that front. We went and saw it. I had a ball of a time, loved it. It still remains as my favorite Star Wars movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And this was really a seminal moment for me growing up. So a lot of memories with this movie, all positive, I would say, and I loved it then. I still love it now, and it's one of those that I will constantly rewatch when I'm thinking of like, oh, I need to put on a Star Wars. Revenge of the Sith might be 9 out of 10 what I put on.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
So let me ask you a question about your experience then, because you were 10, you said, when you saw this movie, right? Okay.
Yes. Yep.
So you would have been what, 5 when the Phantom Menace came out?
So I was 4 when I saw that. Yes.
Wow. Okay. So was that then your first exposure? How did you digest the saga up to that point then?
Yeah. So special editions were actually first. So I
Okay.
was 2 seeing those in the theater. Arguably not the right place and time for a kid to be introduced to this, but my uncle was really steadfast and kind of my Jedi master along the way of stewarding me through this franchise. So that was my first experience. Have no memory of it whatsoever. Phantom Menace, I don't remember a whole lot of it except for the parts that scared me the most. So I would say like anytime there was Palpatine or Maul, those were like seared into my brain. Attack of the Clones is when I really start to like get into the franchise and watching it more regularly. So I saw it in the theater with my uncle, and then that summer of 2003, I saw Attack of the Clones 300 times, and that's not an exaggeration. It was just constantly on during that summer. I was with my uncle pretty much every day that whole summer. And you folks listening, and of course Dennis and Jay on the call here may remember, like, DirecTV just used to have like channels that played the movie over and over. Like they just had one channel devoted to that movie. And I think my uncle jailbroke his DirecTV so that any movie that was a pay-per-view thing he could actually watch without having to pay for it. So we just watched the Attack of the Clones channel all summer long. So that movie is really seared into my brain. And then the Clone Wars Tartakovsky series was a big impact on my life because I thought, wow, they're bridging these gaps here. I feel like such a cool person. Like I know things that are going to happen in between here, and they're building up these character arcs and whatnot. So then add that to the mix. Add the video games that were also very popular at the time too: Battlefront 1, Battlefront 2, and the 2004 special edition re-release also helped build this anticipation up, and then that ultimately led to Revenge of the Sith being that ultimate culmination of all of this leading up to that then.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad that you asked that, Dennis, because I love hearing everyone's entry points into the fandom because we all have such unique stories. And we're all, coming from different eras and age groups and that type of thing, but we still have this common love of Star Wars. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course, happy to. I will, before we get into the next question, I will divulge a little bit more about how much I got involved with this movie before it actually came out. So, um, in the months leading up to it, and this is also the early days of the internet too, folks. So be aware of that one, of how I get into the story here. But 9-year-old me was like really interested. I'm like, there has to be something out there about this upcoming movie. I think I had just watched. There's some bonus material on the extra DVD for the 2004 re-release of the special edition that like had some behind the scenes stuff for Revenge of the Sith, and that got me inspired to like find out what else is out there. So I went online and just started googling around and looked up Revenge of the Sith script, and about 10 or so pages into that, I found a full complete leaked script online that I read in its entirety. So very a few, like probably 5 or 6 months leading up to the May of 2005, I knew pretty much everything that was going to happen in this movie, almost down to the exact. Like it was still a very early version of the script. It wasn't the finalized version because George is still on set, like tinkering with lines and rewriting things. But the main points were there, especially then once it was confirmed when I saw it in the cinema that opening night there. I was like, oh yeah, okay, that wasn't a mistake. That was a real script. Could you imagine in this day and age if someone just like leaked a full script online? They'd be NDAs and sued and fired
Oh yeah.
and you'd be like kicked out of whatever country. Like it's crazy. Like you couldn't even think of something like that these days. But there was a full script just available, and I adjusted it, and really down to the point of like, oh, Padme getting choked out and all that stuff was like in there, and I was like, okay, I know everything that's going to happen in this movie, and then seeing it was then ultimately the confirmation of like, okay, that wasn't just someone befuddling online and messing with me. But yeah, so I knew a whole lot of this before even going. It didn't mess with my enjoyment of the movie at all, I will say. Like it was one of those, people will be like, oh, I saw too much in the trailer, and that kind of ruined my experience for the movie because I feel like I knew everything. But I actually knew everything almost down to like exact dialogue that was said. And I still came out on the other end being like, this is one of my favorite movies ever here. So it's just interesting how times have changed.
For sure. It's ironic that you talk about being able to see the entire script before the movie, because I was just listening to the Phantom Menace soundtrack, the score, the other day, and
Yeah,
there was always that one that Qui-Gon's funeral, and so it was back
Qui-Gon's
in the
Noble End.
day.
Yeah,
Noble End, that's right. Yes,
yeah.
thank you.
Hmm.
But it was the spoiler that was there even in the music that, you couldn't do that today. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
absolutely. No,
good
you could
point.
not.
What's
And to
fascinating to
add that
me.
too,
Oh, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was just going to add to that. Like you talk about Qui-Gon Soul Blend, but I think like the video game adaptation of this and the novelization were also out like 2 weeks before, and also Lego Star Wars, the video game that encompassed all episodes 1, 2, and 3 were out before this movie actually came out too.
Hmm.
So full spoilers were out on display for this movie, and it's funny how like we could not get away with that these days.
Yeah. I was gonna say, what's fascinating to me about this is that your experience with Revenge of the Sith is in some ways parallel to my experience with Return of the Jedi. I was
Yeah.
just a little younger than you were at the time when Return of the Jedi came out. We didn't have the internet, so there was no looking up scripts, but it was the first movie that I followed the development of to the extent that you could follow it through newspapers and the like. And I remember seeing, that was when back in the day when you'd get the newspaper to see where the movies are going to be showing and that
Mhm.
type
Hmm.
and the Times and whatever. But then I got the Scholastic book adaptation of Return of the Jedi and read that before I went to the theater, so I knew everything that was
Amazing.
going to happen. And what was funny about that is that I was reading it and waiting for my dad to come and say goodnight, put me to bed. Well, he fell asleep in my brother's room, and so I read the whole thing like way past my bedtime in one night. Anyway, but yeah, that's fascinating. Fascinating. It's really interesting how the different eras. Yeah, kind of. There's a lot of similarities, but enough differences there.
Mhm.
Okay, second question: what is your favorite scene from Revenge of the Sith?
Oh, wow. My favorite scene, I think, is I guess they would call it the immolation scene, which is the scene where nothing is, oh, sorry, not the immolation scene. Oh my gosh. Padme's ruminations sequence there,
Mm,
Mhm.
where it's just literally Padme and Anakin staring out across like an ocean between them of what is Coruscant. And it's just so much is spoken without anything actually being spoken in that scene. Now, if you ask 10-year-old Anthony, it's obviously going to be the Anakin Obi-Wan fight. But as I got older and like you understand the art of filmmaking and just like what George was trying to do with this sequence here, he's like, wow, like this is the one that I come back to and I just sit with it. And I'm like, wow, there's so much to chew on this one here. There's, Anakin is making assumptions here for Padme, and he's not saying what his true feelings are to her, and she's like, I don't know how to reach this guy that I love, and now knowing like the Clone Wars aspect of it too, because as far as I understand, the last time that they talked was when he was choking out Clovis, beforehand.
Mhm.
So like really they haven't had much of a conversation. He came back, she announces that she's pregnant, and like, okay, well, I guess all is forgiven. Um and now that he's like going down this dark path, and she's like, I kind of get a sense here, but like I can't do anything about it. Again, there's a lot, and it's real, and it's harsh, and it's drama at its best, I would say. So that's the scene that I come back to the most in this movie, where I'm like, okay, George was really being a bit more of an avant-garde filmmaker than I think people were giving him credit for at the time and beyond.
Yeah, and two
Definitely.
observations about that too. First of all, you're not the first guest that has actually pointed out that particular scene, so that seems to resonate quite a bit. And
It
secondly,
does.
I love the fact that you also I always like to ask about how your appreciation for different scenes has evolved as you've evolved as a fan and, in
Hmm.
your age and that type of thing. So you answered that as well. So thank you.
Hmm.
So that's perfect. It's like you read our minds. So
It's
our
like you on
last
trivia, Jay.
question.
It's
Yeah,
you
oh, I
anticipate
know.
the question. So
Well, when we've been podcasting so long, we tend to do that kind of stuff. But Anthony, our last question before we get into the meat of this segment is, who is your favorite character in Revenge of the Sith, and why would you say that is?
Yeah, so this hasn't changed at all over the years, but it still is Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader, and it's really not just because like he's the protagonist of this story, right? But I think I've always considered Revenge of the Sith to be this last piece in one long movie. I've always kind of viewed Star Wars itself as 1 through 6, and now obviously it's a bit longer with all the other stuff in there. I kind of view it as one story. It's not just individual pieces, but you can still look at it that way. I don't mind when people have different approaches to this stuff, but I like that this was this final part of the Anakin Skywalker story at the time. I always viewed 1 through 6 as the rise, the fall, and redemption of Anakin Skywalker, and with this film, you get the added context of the why and the suffering that he ultimately endured that then made him become Darth Vader, which I think makes the Return of the Jedi, redemption all the more powerful and better. So just humanizing and empathizing with Anakin more throughout this journey here, especially as it comes to the actions within Revenge of the Sith, then ultimately make the other films 4, 5, and 6 even more grand and important, in my opinion.
Hmm. Well, that's a great choice, and also aligns with what George Lucas has always said: is that this is the story of Anakin Skywalker.
Also true as well. And I would
There you
argue
go.
7, 8, 9 still are the story of Anakin Skywalker. So that's a
There you
conversation for
go.
a different day.
when we get into the
Absolutely.
sequel trilogy movies, you can come back and discuss that with us. Okay.
That's right.
All right. So we're now going to get into this segment, and we're picking up at 1 hour, 54 minutes, and 21 seconds. And this is going to run to about 2 hour, 3 minute, and 30 second mark. And it picks up with the mid fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan. They are backing out onto some sort of a beam girder that's there on the station of Mustafar. And I love it. There's a little collection droid that's kind of going by his business. It takes a look at them, looks away, looks back, and then decides it wants nothing to do with it and flies off. They're both struggling to keep their balance while they keep up the fight. They're very, very determined. And then Obi-Wan jumps down to a lower level. And we get that very iconic shot at the end of this scene with the two of them engaged. They were each holding the other's saber arm, and as the lava explodes behind them there. So I don't know that there's necessarily a whole lot that's deep and meaningful to discuss here, but this is the first part of the duel between the two that you get to discuss, Anthony. So, what do you think? Where does this rank for you amongst all the various saber fights we get in Star Wars?
Oh, I think it's top of all of them. Honestly, this is like the climax of Star Wars. If you look at through 1 through 6, right? This is the pivotal moment that then leads to the ultimate, origin, I guess, second origin, if you will, of Darth Vader here. So like him getting burnt in the fire and then experiencing that suffering that then Yoda talks about here, where uh, uh, you know that for the hate leads to anger, anger, all that suffering, right? That it's the end point here that you finally get. um so I like this sequence pretty well here too, because I know we're picking it up kind of at the towards the tail end of this fight here. This is where I like to think that, like, oh, they're getting tired here, right? Like you can tell like they're laboring a bit more. Being outside in the heat of Mustafar is starting to weigh on them a bit. The sweat is literally dripping down their faces and whatnot. Like these are two warriors in their prime right now, fighting for their belief system. They're fighting for everything that they think is right in this moment, and they're giving it their all. And I think it's powerful. It's poetic. It's drama. It's everything right there on display here. And yes, it does culminate with the trailer shot, as I like to call it, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's also seared in my mind from watching those trailers so many times, in the build up to the story that was then Revenge of the Sith. So yeah, there again, not a whole lot in terms of like to chew on per se, but it's just good action sequences. And this is coming from a guy that in the months after seeing Revenge of the Sith, I saw it a couple more times in the theater. Me and my buddy AJ learned the once the DVD came out, we had like a portable card, we both may remember like portable car DVD players that had like the TV and all that stuff. We found a way to play it outside with a long extension cord that went to an outlet, and we both learned the choreography for this entirety of that lightsaber battle with Nerf bats and a lot of hitting each other over over that time frame. But yeah, so this one ranks high both narratively, just for the entirety of the crazy stunts that they're doing with this that they both learned. I mean, it's always so fun to watch some of those behind the scenes featurettes of them hitting each other with those real lightsaber sticks, basically, and how many of those did they break over time, I can imagine. But yeah, this is a good sequence to start us off here.
Then we get Yoda doing his best John McClane impression, crawling through the ducks, all the Die Hard. And he calls Bail Organa and says they need to have some careful timing there. And we cut to the Senate floor where the clone troopers are reporting that Yoda's body's not been found, and Mas Amedda responds, well, he's not dead. And Palpatine tells him to double your search. And then Captain Kagi is to prepare Palpatine's shuttle because he senses Lord Vader is in danger. Jay, what do you think about this bit here? I mean, you can talk about Yoda and his connecting with Bail if you want, but to me, the bigger issue here is Palpatine or Sidious, whichever you want to call him, sensing that Lord Vader's in danger and that something he has to go to him now on this. I got a thought on this, but what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it just goes to show how in tune Palpatine has always been to Anakin, and that, he can sense what's going on even from that far away, and just how powerful Palpatine is as well. And I love the John McClane reference, can I just say, especially now that we're getting into the holiday season right now. But I have to just kind of backstep even to Yoda just for a second here. And every time I see this particular scene, it just makes me feel for Yoda just that much more, in that, as much as we know about Yoda and everything that we've gotten, even from the High Republic, that this is something that he is truly devastated by. But again, getting back into Vader slash Anakin and Palpatine, he wants to know, as far as Yoda is concerned, I want to see a body. And I love Mas Amedda in this scene as well. And I often wondered whatever happened to him after Revenge of the Sith. And I think that we've since found out that he remained one of the highest non-Sith employees, if you will, of Palpatine. But I often thought to myself, I wonder how he felt about being misplaced after Anakin kind of took over.
One of the things that occurs to me here is that how often do we hear Palpatine talking about things going as he's foreseen, or everything has transpired exactly as the Force has revealed to him yet. And so now he's sensing Lord Vader is in trouble, and which kind of makes me wonder if he didn't know that was going to happen all along. And because skipping ahead to the end of this movie, got an awfully big grin on his face when Vader steps off the platform there, and is now more machine than man. But anyway, Anthony, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've always thought of this as like being really interesting. I don't know if perhaps I always like it when Palpatine is kind of surprised, right? Where he's I don't know if it's whether it's because he knows that the plan's coming to action, he like surprises himself, or if he's really just like kind of making it up as he goes along the way sometimes too. I always think of like in the Phantom Menace where he's like, I will become Chancellor, and he kind of has that like look on his face where he's like, oh yeah, I guess this kind of worked out. I don't know if it's really played out the way I intended to and whatnot, but he kind of fails upward in some ways, right? He always takes advantage of a situation, right? So I think in his mind, right, I think he knows that Vader is in danger, right? And he senses it, arguably. I mean, you have to go based off of what is happening on screen, right? Because it's always the question of what point in the duel was like he concerned about him? Like, did Obi-Wan already cut off Anakin's arms and legs and leave him burning there? And how long was he burning there and laying at the edge of the lava? Like, did he sense that and then said, I have to go get him? Or is it the interesting part of they're mid duel still, and he's like, hey, something's not right over there with Vader. Maybe he's getting a little tired, or his hubris is getting too much for him over there. I gotta go check in on him and whatnot. But yeah, that's an interesting one, and that's again, Revenge of the Sith is full of many interesting nuggets that don't need to be solved. I think this is one of those that we can debate as fans in a fun way. So I will leave it as I think there is an interesting connection between the two of them, and he sensed that something was in danger, and I think. I think if he had it his way, he would prefer that Anakin not be in a mechanized suit.
Mhm.
But certainly, he'll take it because I think as the opportunist that Palpatine is, like all dictators are, he sees that there's a silver lining in which that Padme is no longer in the picture anymore, and he can maybe control Vader a bit more in the suit now that everything's taken off the table in terms of like the former Anakin Skywalker is now he's fully Vader, and it's not only just a name transformation but a physical transformation too, so that he's really able to keep the Jedi out of his mind.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm. So we go back to Mustafar, and Anakin and Obi-Wan are still at it. They are now, I don't even know what to call all these parts of the structure, but they are outside from, as we saw in the previous time, and they are creeping across to that sail part of the structure. And as they do that, the lava flares up and splashes across the top of the support beam, which causes it to start melting. They both take shelter, and they watch as the lava rains down around them, and they avoid all of it. And then as it falls off into the lava flow, they start climbing up into that. This fight is just wild. And I know that George Lucas brought Steven Spielberg in to put this whole thing together. Uh, Jay, what do you think about it? I mean, this thing goes all over the place. It starts outside of the landing platform, goes inside the structure, goes back outside, and now they're on the lava flow.
Oh, it's glorious and it's so visually stunning. And there's just so much emotional weight to it as well. Because, as Anthony, when you pointed out, it just made me smile when you said that you recreated this fight because it just made me think of my own kids, when they were little and they would do this as well. But I also recently ran across some trivia that this is the longest continuous sword fight in cinematic history when you put all of the pieces and parts of it together. So I thought that was super cool. But, for me, the symbolism of just the lava raining down and just everything is melting and it's catching on fire, and that's just the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan, what's happening in a nutshell. And there's so much rage and fire within Anakin, and it's literally exploding outward. And you can start to see the little singes in Obi-Wan's robe, and you can start to see, where some of this is affecting him, on a physical level as well. And Anthony, you pointed out that they are starting to get tired. I mean, yeah, they're Jedi, but I mean, they've been at it and it's stinking hot there. So, it's got to be taken some out of them as well, and hard to breathe and the whole 9 yards. So, every time I watch this, I just get so mesmerized in this fight. And, the lightsabers themselves just being juxtaposed in color on the red, you've got the blue on the red, and it's just, oh, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts, Anthony?
Just yes, and Jay put it very eloquently there. The last thing that I will note here is if anyone got a chance to watch the new season of Light and Magic, they actually go into Revenge of the Sith a bit about the making of the film, and you would think that um, generally this movie has a ton of blue and green screen, mostly digital, etc. But this lava sequence from that documentary I learned is actually pretty practical in terms of the props department was creating the lava for them, and
Hmm.
that's pretty neat detail that after all these years I had no idea about. I thought that was just like ILM just creating it with a digital computer, and I thought, well, okay, it looks pretty good. But this is kind of one of those hybrid effects where it is a bit of them finding out how to actually create molten lava and then interposing that with the digital backgrounds of the scene. So this is cinema, and it's a great way to showcase how the art form has come since the Phantom Menace, and even since Attack of the Clones too, which is more digital than probably this movie is itself. But yeah, it's really cool to see all this come together here in this finale.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And Dennis and I are very big fans of that series as well.
Indeed, we are. So indulge me for just a second here. One of the things that occurred to me in a way it had not occurred to me on prior viewings when I was making my notes for this for today, and that's the benefit of only talking about 10 minutes of the movie at a time, is that this part of the duel is the descent into hell for these two characters.
Yeah.
And Anakin doesn't come back from it. Obi-Wan does, but they're both changed forever for this. And I think you could argue that they were getting there. You know, they go into the structure and then they come out the structure and then they're walking across that balance beam and then they jump down. But it's when that lava severs the sail off of it and that plunges into the lava flow that you can call it crossing the river Styx if you want to get into mythology, whatever the situation is. But they've gone into a cave. They're now in this descent. Anakin, like I said, he doesn't recover. I mean, this forever changes. This is a baptism by fire that he's going through. Obi-Wan is also forever changed for the experience. And we'll see that especially in the original trilogy movies that occur after this. So, yeah, I'm going to restrict my use of that word because I don't want to have to even consider putting an explicit rating on this episode. But there we are.
Well, Mustafar is kind of the symbolic unconscious of Anakin too. I mean, you know me, Dennis and Anthony, I'm so into the psych aspect of a lot of these things. So, I mean, the eruptions themselves are just the emotional impulses erupting from Anakin's unconscious. The clash of the fire and machinery is his instinct versus his control. I mean, it's basically Anakin's inner world made outward in this way. And Obi-Wan is succumbing to it in some ways at this point. And that's, like I said, with his robe starting to show that little bit of singe is just, yeah, I could go on and on, but I digress.
Well, we got lots more of this duel to talk about, so we'll
Yes,
have
we
more
do.
opportunities to expound on that idea here. But back to Yoda, he finally finds his hatch, activates. Why is that word so hard to say? He activates his beacon, and then Bale shows up and he jumps into his little hover car. And he says, "Into exile I must go, failed I have." What do you think about that sentiment, Anthony? That he's failed in his task at defeating Sidious, and as a result, he's got to go into exile.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think this is one that I think a lot of people have grappled with over the last 20 years, right? But I think Yoda realized that he had one real chance to take out the Emperor, and he really didn't complete that mission because, as I kind of walked my brain around it all these years, right? It took a while for the clones to figure out like that Yoda was there and that the emperor needed help. So once the cavalry comes in, so to speak, right, he would have been so outnumbered, so to have to deal with all the clones descending on him, plus dealing with arguably the Sith master himself. It would have just been too much for him. So into exile he must go if he wants to keep the Jedi Order in somewhat of a state that it can exist in again in the future, right? So this is him realizing that I failed in my mission, and in order to preserve for the next day, which is what ultimately he does do, right? He's there as a sage, wise teacher for both technically Obi-Wan a little bit, but also for Luke and Leia. Leia by Luke through Luke, right? So he serves a better purpose and a greater purpose in dormancy than actively being there and trying to solve the problem himself, which I think is a little bit of growth for Yoda, perhaps, because I know this is his worst fear coming to pass, right? He's from Clone Wars and beyond. We've known that like this has been his big worry that like the dark side is taking over and how much are the Jedi losing their grip on the Force, right? And the prophecy misread, probably all that stuff. And he's the head Jedi master of this council and of the order, so the buck kind of falls upon him for letting it fall under his watch all these years. So to figure out where they went wrong, pass on better lessons to the next generation, be a better teacher for them than perhaps they were for others. It's sad that it came to be that way, but ultimately it works better for the galaxy in the next couple of films because of that.
Jay, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you put it perfectly, Anthony. It goes back to, as you said, it's one of the most, debated decisions, I guess you could say, in Star Wars is why did Yoda do this? He
Mhm.
wasn't defeated in spirit necessarily. I mean, he was, and that's why I felt bad for him, but he wasn't running away in fear. And I felt bad because of the fact that he knew he couldn't be there. As you said,
Mhm.
his inaction was in fact his action. And he kind of understood the higher purpose for doing that, almost like his famous phrase, "You must unlearn what you have learned." And he had to relearn
Yeah.
a lot of things. He had to reconnect with the force in a different way, and wait for his time, as you said, for protecting the Skywalker twins. And his reason to disappear was partially because of that. And I think that, again, this is one of those examples for me personally where rewatching this and becoming a little bit more attuned to the underlying reasons for some of the character motivations has really made me appreciate it just that much more. But what
Mhm.
do you think, Dennis?
Well, there's a couple things. One, at this point, he doesn't know that Anakin's having any children here because
True.
when Obi-Wan finds that out from Padme, they've already been to the Jedi Temple and split up with him going after Anakin, and then and Yoda's going to go after Sidious here, and so he doesn't know that yet. I agree with everything about that. He's got some thinking to do because he does. I mean, they've been operating under a certain system that's been flawed now for some time, and we got to see in the Acolyte, of course, post-release material that there was issues 100 years ago, and
Mhm.
they didn't quite root all those out. And so I'm trying to put myself in his space right then, which is he's just had this epic encounter with Sidious. He's gotten away, and so he jumps into Bale's car. It's this moment, without knowing anything else, that he has to go into exile. He doesn't even say where he's going to go to exile.
Right.
Right now, it's just that he's got to go to. He needs to go into exile. One of the reasons I can think of is that he is a target, and if he remains on course, then a
Mhm.
whole lot of people are going to suffer for it because he's just going to be a beacon for Sidious to go after. And so, did he have in mind Dagobah in this moment? Maybe, maybe not. But I mean, we know from the Clone Wars that he had been there previously, and so, but it is a candidate that's teeming with life. It's remote. He can go there, and he's not likely to be found. And I get that, but but it's just like I can't help but feel like terrible for him.
Right.
It's down to him and Obi-Wan in this situation, and they put everything they had into defeating the Sith. And although Obi-Wan he was not successful, and Yoda was just not successful. And so the Sith are there left at the top of this the chain in the galaxy here. And so yeah, I mean, I don't have a specific example that I think describes everything fully, but the this notion here that is at this moment, things were bad before, he now knows
Mhm.
that he's just having been through that fight with Sidious, how powerful that guy is, how powerful that foe is, that he needs to recover and plot what's next.
Mhm. And I wish we had more time for it, but obviously we don't. It'd be a fun what if experiment to say, what if Yoda stayed?
Hmm.
Would he
Mhm.
stay on Coruscant to continue fighting Sidious? Would he stay in the open, become a resistance leader? Would he stay hidden but maybe not in
Mhm.
exile? That would be a fun conversation. Obviously, we don't have time for that, but
But you know what? I will say this. Now that you bring up that question, I think he learned his lesson that the Jedi are not warriors. They should not be leading armies.
Mhm.
And so neither he or Obi-Wan stick around to lead any of the armies for the rebellion
Right.
against the
Mhm.
Empire. And what do they end up doing? They end up training the next hope, Luke. And then they had Leia waiting in the wings, even though she didn't know it at the time. And that was how they were going to defeat this. They were focusing on the Sith, not focusing on the Empire in that
Mhm.
situation. So it took him long enough, but he did learn the lesson eventually.
So good points.
Yeah. Okay. So back to Anakin and Obi-Wan. So they are climbing up the structure as it floats down that lava flow. And as they approach a lava fall, Obi-Wan grabs onto a cable and swings out. Anakin does the same thing. They get a little Tarzan pass with a clash of sabers. And then Obi-Wan spots a lava platform, or retrieval platform, and he jumps off onto that as the structure starts to go over the edge. And then Anakin does a force leap, just as he was getting ready to perish and go over himself, and lands on a poor droid who has no idea what's going on. And then the saber fight continues, which is all good and well. But I think the dialogue that comes after is the key part of this scene, where Obi-Wan says, "I failed you, Anakin, I failed you." And then Anakin's response is, "I should have known the Jedi were planning to take over." An exasperated Obi-Wan responds, "Anakin, Chancellor Palpatine is evil." And then Anakin comes back with, "From my point of view, the Jedi are evil." And Ewan McGregor's deliver of this line, "Well, then you are lost," is spot on perfect.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then Anakin says, "Well, this is the end for you, my master." And then Anakin jumps onto Obi-Wan's platform, really loses balance, but recovers. Okay, but I want to focus on that dialogue here for a moment. Is this a legitimate difference in point of view, Anthony, or is this Anakin really desperately grabbing on to a new worldview, because what choice does he have in this position?
That's a good point, and I feel like both can be true, right? I definitely more lean to the side of Anakin believes in what he's doing here, and I think he is right. Like from his point of view, the Jedi are evil, right? That's true.
Mhm.
And then Obi-Wan definitely believes that Chancellor Palpatine is evil as the Sith Lord, right? So I think that can be true, and I think that also just thereby by Anakin's choice of like, I pledge myself to your teachings, I need you in order to help save Padme. You could argue that he's also siding on the side that he chose for that reason and kind of being a really loyal person. But he's loyal to Palpatine long before this time, and I think his Clone Wars has helped to exacerbate the problems of the Jedi and his struggles with the Order. And he's frankly had struggles with the Order all the way back to the Phantom Menace, right? With not being able to like see his mom and whatnot, and just the way that they kind of treated him as a kind of outsider, so to speak, for many of his early years and beyond. So seeing just the general corruption there, knowing that there were things that maybe the Jedi weren't teaching him, that dangling thread there, right? So he's seen arguably they were enacting a coup, right, of an elected leader that didn't really have a chance to step down. So both, I think both are true. It's tough because it's the hypocrisy of it all, but that is arguably the 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 downside of studying this the saga, right, is the fact that
Mhm.
multiple truths can exist at the same time, and
Mhm.
that's the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, right? I think that's why he's so relatable to a lot of people, right? Is because we do things out of noble gestures. We have a sense of justice. I think he has a sense of justice too, and he sees injustices and he wants to stand up against it. But also, who are you defending when you just stand up against those injustices, right? We all would normally side that the Jedi are better, but we also have seen the instances where they arguably are not in the right with things that they've done, whether it be through the Acolyte or Phantom Menace and beyond. Um, so it's tough because that's the grand nature of things, right? When you exist outside of the original trilogy, where things are very much black and white, the Empire bad, Jedi good kind of mentality, right? The prequels introduce what if maybe what you thought wasn't actually true, and this is actually what happened, and all that stuff, and it introduces a bit more of complexity into the nature here. So it's why both cases are true, and why it's a tough, tragic argument to see basically two brothers, and we can talk into why I say brothers in a little bit here.
Mhm.
But it's sad to see this. This is what it's come to after what 12 years of a relationship between these two. Where they've spent most of their days together. It's really sad.
Mhm. Mhm. Jay, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, to springboard off of what you just said, Anthony, I mean, Dennis, you and I have talked about this before in terms of people that truly have a belief in what they're doing is the correct thing. We sometimes label that as evil, and what could be quote unquote evil to someone else may be the right thing to do to someone different, and of course you could
Hmm.
bring up Thanos from Marvel. But I mean, for when you look at Anakin in this moment, he's speaking from a different mind. He has completely disassociated from who he was as Anakin Skywalker. So I
Mm.
do think that he does believe that the Jedi are evil. So when Obi-Wan says, then you are lost, he doesn't believe that. His inner compass has completely swung in the opposite direction. And he is not trusting anyone in this moment except for Palpatine. And a lot of that is because Obi-Wan showed up the way that he did. And, so there's just so much to what's happening in this moment that, and Anakin has always justified things from a very protective, almost delusionary state. I had to kill them. I am doing the right thing. They deserved it. I'm saving Padme. I'm creating peace. These are all kind of his little defense mechanisms. So yeah, I totally believe that Anakin believed that he was, saying when the Jedi are evil. He believed it 100%.
I don't think he did. That's just my, okay. I mean, you both make a compelling case, but I'm looking back on the movie, and let's look at his fall for a second. He's in Palpatine's office, and he has that epiphany that Palpatine's the Sith Lord they've been looking for. And what does he do? He pulls out his lightsaber and he holds it up to him. And then when Palpatine says, "Are you going to kill me?" and he says, "I sure would like to," and excellent delivery by Hayden Christensen.
Oh yeah.
And then he runs off and he tells the Jedi. He tells Mace Windu that I think he's the Sith Lord we've been looking for. And he wants to go and help and take Palpatine in. But he's sent to the Jedi Council room to wait. But he can't do it. So he goes to Palpatine, not because he thinks the Jedi are evil, and not because he's afraid of necessarily Palpatine being arrested and tried. It's that he might get killed. And he needs Palpatine alive so that he can save Padme.
Yeah.
And his objection to Mace Windu killing Palpatine, again, had nothing to do with the Jedi being evil. It was his plea was, you can't kill him. He basically says that that's the responsibility of the Senate, that's the responsibility of the courts. And then I need him. And that's when he takes off Mace's hand in this. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, he gets sent to the Jedi Temple to wipe all the Jedi out, not just the Council, not just the Masters. Now I'm repeating the Attack of the Clones, but the women and the children too. No, but but he does take out the children. He walks into the council room where the younglings are hiding that are not in on this plot, and he slaughters them in this situation. And he buys into this plot of evil. Now, he does have Palpatine whispering in his ear this entire movie, planting these ideas. The Jedi don't trust me. They've asked you to do something that's dishonest. But he does not, and he doesn't have the advantage of being in the council meeting when a lot of these things are decided here. But then even on the platform when he's talking to Padme, he's telling her, "I'm more powerful than the Emperor. I can overthrow him and we can make the galaxy as we want it to be." It's not that he wanted to, it's not that he believed in Palpatine's crusade against the Jedi. It was all in this part. He's caught up in the dark side. He is flailing about in the dark side. And even look at the way he's talking to Obi-Wan here. It's like the dark side's flowing through him. And he's just, when he was fighting, he was in his element. And you could almost see the calm in him. It's when he had to stop and talk that the anger and everything just came bubbling him out, banging out of him. So at any rate, having said all that, I don't doubt that there's some part of him that wants to believe that the Jedi are evil, because it justifies everything he's done. When he's crying on the platform after he slaughtered the Separatist leadership, he recognizes that he's fallen, that he's not the person he was, that he's lost himself in this situation. And now here he is, to me, it's a desperate justification of everything that he's done. He may have had the best intentions to save Padme, but here he is arguing with Obi-Wan, because what else is there to say in this situation? Anyway, that's my thought.
Yeah. And I think, that's where the disassociation comes in that he's intellectually, he believes the Sith rhetoric, but emotionally, yes, he is still in agony for sure. But in this moment, he believes it intellectually.
So too, it's not like Obi-Wan is like also welcoming him back with kind arms and welcome arms too. He's not like, "Come back, Anakin. It'd be great to have you. We forgive you for all your trespasses."
We'll stick a pin in that thought for a second, because let's get to what happens next, which is Obi-Wan drops off the platform and he lands on the bank of the lava flow, and he says, "It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground." He warns him right there, and Anakin says, "You underestimate my power," and then Obi-Wan, like, regret, you can hear the regret in his voice. He says, "Don't try it." He's warning Anakin here that, Obi-Wan does not want to do what has to be done in this situation. And you know, he's already extended the olive branch by saying, "I failed you, Anakin." You know, that is, you know, what's happened to you. You know, something's happened to you. It's bad, and I failed you. It's what's led to this. And then Anakin tries. He goes for it. He jumps over he jumps over Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan slices off an arm and two legs. Anakin shovels down the shore to the edge of the lava, and then another great delivery by Ewan McGregor. You know, you were the chosen one. It was said you would destroy the Sith, not join them, bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness. And he picks up Anakin's lightsaber, and then Anakin screams, "I hate you." And then Obi-Wan's response is, "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you." And then that's when Anakin has his immolation scene. He catches on fire, and Obi-Wan turns away and leaves. So, you know, so yeah, he may not be welcoming Anakin back here, but there is a whole lot of regret. There is a whole lot of reluctance on Obi-Wan's part, and that is his last attempt to reach out to Anakin. He's got him cornered, or so he thinks, but Anakin doesn't do the rational thing. What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, I will add to this too, right? It's like that the Anakin always like in this moment at least trying to be like trying to one up Obi-Wan, right? He's kind of made him the bane of his existence, right? And he's like, you underestimate my power, right? I have through the dark side have these incredible gifts and strength of power, and I'm going to defeat you with my brute force here at this point. But this mirrors almost exactly what Obi-Wan did with Maul in the Phantom Menace here at the end, right?
Mhm.
Like clearly should not have been able to get the one-ups on Maul here as as he does in that movie. So like the Maul's overconfidence and hubris perhaps is what does him in there. And this is arguably Anakin, right? Trying to say like, oh, I bet you over the last, 12 years that they've been together, that he heard that story so many times of how Obi-Wan was able to best Maul, right? The survivor of a Sith Lord engagement, right? That must have been talked about in the halls of the Jedi Council and beyond for eons, right? Um, so he's like, I'm gonna beat you at your own game here. I know what you're gonna do here, but Obi-Wan's like, I have the experience of actually doing it. So that's how he knows exactly the same move and how to counter it and all that. And um, yeah, this is a tough thing because we at least I grew up with these characters, right? And this was a scene that we were building up to. I knew it was going to happen, and it still didn't make it any easier to see. It's tough to as a kid to watch your hero literally catch on fire. And boy, does the camera linger on that too, and goes back a couple times to showcase really, George is making a point here. Like this is what happens when you go down these dark paths, right? This is the suffering he's talking about here. When you have fear, anger, hate, and that leads to the suffering here. That it becomes. He becomes entombed in this character that is Darth Vader now. And ostensibly, Anakin Skywalker dies in this scene. What was left of him for um, about 25 years then until Luke is able to redeem him. So it's tough. And I will say all that is true, pretty much what Obi-Wan says here. But I think he has one last failure in what he says there, where he's like, "You are my brother," and that's exactly it right there, right? Anakin never needed a brother; he needed a father.
Mm-hmm.
And he found that father in Palpatine. The Jedi never really gave him that nurturing that he was looking for in leaving his mom and then knowing that his mom was gone, that he found in kind of Padme to some degree, but really he found in that male support, I guess, from Palpatine, and that nurturing kind voice, that seduction perhaps, is what leads him down that dark path when, uh, you know, Mace Windu was like, I don't trust him. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Anakin did really hard, as far as I know and understand. Like, it really didn't do a whole lot for him not to trust him at that point. He's the chosen one. You keep holding him back and never giving him the assignments and disrespecting him in front of his peers and colleagues that he trusted all this time, right? It's tough, and then that's exactly it. Is he's like, "You were my brother, Anakin," and I'm like, "Yeah, it frustrates me every time." Where I'm like, you were like he should have said you were like a son to me, and that would have, I think, been more impactful to Anakin as he's burning there, right? Because he finally would have recognized that relationship that they had with each other. But Obi-Wan, the reluctant, I guess I'll take this boy on as my apprentice
Mm-hmm.
because my master died and I was holding him in my arms as he passed. And he was like, "Train the boy," and all that stuff. I'm like, I guess I will. I just became a Jedi Knight myself. I guess I'm taking on a Padawan now, and then having to deal with the teenage years and all that with him, and through Attack of Clones and whatnot. Like that's the tragedy again coming to the pass here. Is like after all this, it takes that sentence still that Obi-Wan didn't learn his lesson here, and then it takes the series, right? That's why I'm glad the Obi-Wan Kenobi series exists, because he deals with that guilt and that pain of going through that and living, and he's haunted by it, and then he has to reconcile with it, and he apologizes directly to him again for that, and realizes that Anakin is truly gone, or he gets to see Anakin for like a little half second there, but recognizes that a bit more to an extent there. But yeah, this is really great scene. It does what it needs to do. It's tragedy at the greatest extent, right? And it shows just truly how much you can get away with the PG-13 rating.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. The other thing about this,
Yeah.
you're talking about the move, where you equated it to Maul, but Anakin just did the whole leap over Obi-Wan just moments before when they
That's
were
right.
on floating down the lava river, except for they were on the same plane at that point, and now Obi-Wan, and I guess that finally confirmed that's what having the high ground means in this situation, is that you come leaping over me now, I'm going to have the angle to take off your limbs. But anyway, Jay, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, just to touch on a few things that you both just said, going back to when Obi-Wan says, "I have failed you, Anakin." I mean, this is truly the embodiment of when someone's life passes before their eyes, because this goes all the way back to the initial promise that Obi-Wan made to Qui-Gon in that he would train the boy.
Mhm.
And, everything that has led up to this moment, yes, Obi-Wan does blame himself, but you're right, Anthony. He does get a little absolution from that in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series when Anakin says,
Mhm.
"You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker, I did." So,
Yep.
there's that. And then the whole high ground thing, as you both pointed out, there's that whole history lesson with Maul. And I think for Obi-Wan, the don't try it wasn't just a taunt. It's kind of heartbreak for him, because he knows the outcome, because he knows Anakin. And he's basically saying to Anakin, I know exactly how you think. You won't back down, and you will choose the path that destroys you. And that's exactly what happens.
Mhm.
And every time I see this, it just, oh my gosh, it's so gut wrenching. It truly, truly is. And then to touch quickly upon "You were my brother, Anakin," I think in Attack of the Clones, Anakin does refer to Obi-Wan. He's like a father to me. And when he's
Yeah.
telling
Yeah.
Padme, and but he's holding me back, and all these things. And I just know personally, my sister was 18 years older than I was. So we're the bookends of the family. So growing up, I saw her as being so much older, obviously. And she was more of a mother figure to me, because my niece and I are 3 years apart in age. And so my niece and I were more like sisters. But as I grew and our relationship kind of grown and matured as well, of course, I saw her more as my sister. So I think that's where Obi-Wan is coming from, in that, he sees him more as a brother because of that emotional maturity, and for everything that they've been through too.
Yeah, yeah. The thing about this scene here is that when Yoda and Obi-Wan were deciding what to do back in the Jedi Temple, Obi-Wan desperately wanted to go after Sidious because he can't take out, he can't be the one to take out Anakin, because as the novelization points out, Anakin is in fact his attachment in this situation.
Mhm.
It was not what he intended when he took Anakin on as a Padawan, but that's what it became. And now he's here, and they've had it out. They fought all across the scene. Obi-Wan has yelled out all of his frustration with Anakin. Anakin has yelled out all of his frustration with everything he's been going through in the last several months, from being manipulated by the Chancellor, being manipulated by the Jedi Council, not being included on decisions that the Council were making, and being given missions to spy on the Chancellor when he knew that was dishonest. And then, getting this reveal that when he had this hope that he was going to learn some power that would save Padme, it was coming from a Sith Lord, and then being put in that moment where he had to make that decision. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan has been the buffer for Anakin. He's tried to do what's right by the Force. He's tried to do what's right by the Jedi. He's tried to do what's right by the Anakin, but those are three different things. And ultimately, Anakin justify it however you want, but Anakin made some very, very bad decisions. And as he tells Padme, Anakin was a threat. This is what had to be done. He did not want to do it. And, you know, he knew he was going to Mustafar for this reason. And he says at the beginning of the fight, I will do what I must. And Anakin tells him, you're going to try. But what would Obi-Wan have given to just keep pushing this moment off and pushing it off and pushing it off? But Anakin forced the issue when he jumped over him. And that was it. I mean, Obi-Wan could not come up with another reason to keep this going. And as you pointed, they were at their limits. They were completely exhausted at this point. So we could talk about this scene for another 20 minutes, but we got to start towards wrapping it up here. Back at the landing platform, R2 greets Obi-Wan, and 3PO comes down the ramp and tells Obi-Wan that they've got Padme on board. When he gets up there, Padme's unconscious. She wakes up and she asks about Anakin before falling back to sleep, and then the ship departs Mustafar. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about the next scene real quick, and we can talk about all this at one time if we want. We get back to Anakin and his cybernetic arm, which he still has. He's using to try and pull himself back up the bank of the lava flow. And Palpatine shuttles arrives. One of the clones finds Anakin and then points it out to Palpatine, and he says, "There he is. He's still alive." And then Anakin has managed to get up just enough on the bank that he can flop over on his back, and Palpatine calls for a medical capsule, kneels down next to Anakin, and puts a hand on his head. Jay, I know you typically keep up with what's going on in the novelization, that at least the parts that correspond to this, and we just talked about the novelization. I couldn't remember what, if any, perspective we got from Palpatine in this moment, and it was none. And I was really disappointed by that, because I really wanted to know what Palpatine was thinking in this moment, because, like I said just a moment ago, for a guy who routinely looks into the future and says everything's developing the way he foresaw, and then the way he reacts to Vader getting off the table later, it's just, I couldn't help but wonder if it's like, yes, I've got him where I want him in that moment, or what he was thinking in this situation. But Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, you're right. It would have been nice to be able to get a little bit more of Palpatine's inner monologue in this particular instance, because I think, Anthony, earlier you had talked about that I think he would have definitely wanted Anakin to be whole, and he definitely got a altered version of him, because as we know, if he's more machine than man, he's probably not channeling the Force in the same way that he would have had he been the chosen one and been whole. And so I think maybe part of that, to answer your question, Dennis, is that maybe there was a part of Palpatine that, again, looking forward to that scene when Vader gets off the table, that he's a little bit, happy that he's able to keep him a little bit more subdued, because he knows how powerful Anakin is. And even though it is the way of the Sith that he would eventually be overthrown in the rule of two, nobody wants to meet their demise that quickly.
Sure.
So yeah, so I definitely would like to get a little bit more of that inner monologue, for sure. And we missed it.
Well, and looking back to earlier part of this movie, when at the beginning of the confrontation between Yoda and Sidious just boasts to Yoda that Lord Vader is going to become more powerful than either one of us in this situation. And I think, Palpatine was devoted to the rule of two at that time. Sequel trilogy, not so much. But then, and the point is that I picked the perfect apprentice. He is going to be more powerful than me, and the Sith are going to reign forever in this situation. But he kind of gets a reprieve here once Anakin gets put in the suit. This is somebody he can control for a while. And so, to your point, Jay, his time as the Sith Lord has probably just been extended. And in a way, that's kind of a gift to him. But Anthony, we talked a lot. What thoughts do you have?
It's like a second unlimited power moment, right? He realizes that he's
yeah.
accomplished all of his goals, right? He's now basking in the glory of what is his empire now. He's the plans that they had set long before with Plagueis and Maul and whatnot have over 20 years have now finally come to pass, and he gets to bask in this wonderful bit of peace that he has established for the galaxy. I guess still a galaxy tremendously at war, but at least in his mind, he's accomplished all of his goals and just gets to dive into further Sith relics and weird stuff about necromancy and whatnot. That's for a different conversation. But yeah, ultimately here I do love there's like this gentleness, right? He's like, oh, there he is, he's still alive, and then wonderful Ian McDermott line switching right back to kind of being mean Palpatine Sith Lord, right? Get to medical capsule immediately. Always puts a chuckle on my face as you literally see Anakin Skywalker there burnt to a crisp.
Your peons.
Much needed reprieve when I was in the theater at 10 years old watching this. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. And ultimately, as you get to the next sequence there, not as funny as Padme then dies in the birth of twins and whatnot, and Anakin, Padme falls to Anakin, Darth Vader rises again, and there's a lot to talk about in that stuff, but you'll get to it in the next episode.
Indeed. Mm-hmm. Any other final thoughts on this segment from either of you?
Anthony?
Nothing from me.
You go first? Well, there's just so much emotional weight and symbolism in this. And it's every time I watch it, I pull out a little bit more. And I'm very thankful for the novelization in that way as well. And I'm glad that we just went over it too, because I was thinking back to some of the things that were in that and trying to pull those things out of there as well. So, and Anthony, it's always great to get your insights too.
So before you go, Anthony, again, thank you for joining us for this. We were talking off air about Force Ghost Conversations just a bit, and you all have a big anniversary coming up. So why don't you fill everybody in on what's going on and where they can find you?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much again for having me on, and it's always a pleasure to chat with both of you, but also particularly to chat about my favorite movie. Right? It's not a chore at all to talk about this, and when you send over the minutes specifically of watching this, I was like, man, I get a really really good part of this. This wasn't like not like this film has any really lull parts to me, but like, man, this was a great chunk to chat about here today. So thanks again for having me on. Yeah, Force Ghost Conversations. We are trucking along, as one might say. We are at the time of recording this, November 21st. That Friday will be our 4-year podcasting anniversary. So yay for that. We're still going to keep going for many more years beyond this, I hope. So yeah, we're available. It's a cozy podcast for all things Star Wars and Lucasfilm adjacent things. So we'll talk about Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Willow, whatever, frankly, I want to talk about that kind of I fit into the Lucasfilm narrative. There's a lot of stuff in ILM that they touch upon that I kind of make fit into the puzzle of things to talk about in the show. But we've had a lot of fun conversations of late over there. And you can find us, of course, on any of the podcasting sites, Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever, I don't even know anymore. Amazon Music. There's podcast places all over, and you can find us there. Just search for Force Ghost Conversations. We're also on pretty much every social media site too, whether it be X, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky. Just search for the podcast name Force Ghost Conversations, and we'll be there, and we'd love to continue the conversation.
Perfect. Well, once again, thanks so much for joining us. Okay. Well, there you have it. That was part 11 of Revenge of the Sith. Thanks again to Anthony from Force Ghost Conversations for joining us. And another fun discussion, Jay. Every time there's something that happens in the conversation and we go someplace that I was not anticipating when I first started putting together my notes for this conversation.
Oh, yeah. And it's so sensational being able to get the perspective and insights of our guests. It never gets old for sure. And I can't believe we're almost to the end of this movie. I mean, this year has gone by so fast, it seems like.
Yeah. And we're going to have to figure out when we're going to do that, because December is a very busy month for us as we're wrapping up the year and doing all kinds of stuff. Yes. Our Christmas episodes and New Year's episodes and things like that. So a lot coming on the podcast here in the next month and a half. All right. Sure. Well, with that said, thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and this entry in our Revenge of the Sith series. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you want to make sure that you get the next episode, the next and final episode in the Revenge of the Sith series, please subscribe to the podcast. You can do that, of course, on your podcatcher choice. You know how to do that. Find the button, press. You got it. And then if you've done that, we would love it if you could leave us a rating and review wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. That does help get the show in front of more people, and we consider it a holiday treat. So please. And if you want to catch more Podcast Stardust beyond the 100 or 200 episodes you're likely to find in your podcatcher choice, head over to retrozap.com. It's the home of the RetroZap Podcast Network and all previous 966 shows. And all the other movies we've done like this, whether it's Empire Strikes Back Rogue One, Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Return of the Jedi. We've done several of these. This is our sixth one. Is that right, Jay? Yeah.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're getting there. We don't have that many left to go until they start releasing new movies next year. Wow. We're at that point. We're never going to catch up. But, okay. Enough of that aside. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody where we can found on social media again and elsewhere on the internet?
Sure thing. So if you want to keep the conversation going and connect with us online, you can do so on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And you can also find us on YouTube and YouTube Music, which do support ratings and reviews and also interactions. So please let us know your insights as well to this installment of Revenge of the Sith or anything else that's on your mind. And we also maintain some Pinterest boards. So if you're in need of some ideas for everything Star Wars, you can head over there. And if you have any questions for us or other comments, you can always send us an email, podcaststardust@gmail.com. And we are looking for listener questions. When we have enough, we will put them together in a listener question episode. And if you are in need of some new Podcast Stardust swag, you can head over to TeePublic, and the link to that is in our show notes. And I was actually just on our TeePublic site not too long ago, and they've taken away some of the options. Like there's no more tote bags or wall hangings, which kind of bummed me out. So it's mainly apparel, but you can get 7 different show logos and change it up. So there you go.
TeePublic denying people the opportunity to adorn their house with our logo. What is this world coming to?
Right. And
All
no
right.
more baby onesies either, which bummed me out.
You do like ending the pitch for our apparel with that too. So
we're from 1 to 92, right? Just like the Christmas song says.
Okay. Well, upcoming on the show on Friday, we're going to be getting into the week's Star Wars news, and then on Monday we are resuming our coverage of Volume 3 of Star Wars Visions. So, thanks for listening to episode 967 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and until next time, may the Force be with you.